What's up, La Raza? Supporters of La Raza, or you people that are just here. Thank you for another one of these episodes. This is probably going to be the last episode that I have on magic. I'm moving to something else on the episode for next week. This is the place where your curiosity about Mesoamerican life will be satisfied, or at least I'm trying to. Offer these type of services for myself and for other people that may be interested. This episode is a culmination of all the magical episodes that were previously placed on YouTube. This one is a little bit more controversial than the other ones because this is just a lot of educated guesses. We have very little information as to how the people of Mesoamerica did their day-to-day or out-of-need magic. But we do know that it existed because there are some archaeological findings that there was such tradition. We have a little bit of detail as to what that entailed, but there is very little academic publications as far as the whole spectrum. What did it take place? How did it take place? What did they ask for? And so on and so forth. But there is a lot of information if we put all the stuff together. I am not an archaeologist, and so I'm going to give you as much as I can. I'm going to piece as many pieces together as I can to try to present this information to you. Now, before I begin, I would like to kind of define the word magic. For us, the word magic is a huge umbrella term for many different disciplines that were practiced by the people in the past. And so the Mesoamericans certainly did not define the practices that I'm going to describe in this episode as magic. They describe them as their day-to-day pleadings to the gods, how to beg for the relationship between them and the stars and nature. And so this was not magic for them, but this definitely fits within our definition of what we consider magic today. All right, so let's begin by saying that the ancient people of Mesoamerica believed that everything had a spirit. The rock had a spirit, the plants had a spirit, the animals had a spirit, of course we have a spirit, the stars had a spirit, the planets had a spirit. And as such, we have to understand where are they coming from. We have to understand that these people lived more than 500 years ago, and their perspective of reality was very different from ours. And so we need to start to understand that mountains also had a spirit. And according to the tradition and most of the literature that we can find as far as Mesoamerican magic, this is where most of the magic took place. In fact, the reason why they built pyramids was because the pyramid itself was a mountain. It was a magical mountain where they were able to divide the 4 cardinals of the universe, or 5 if you want to see the center as one of them. And they were able to make their pleadings to the gods based on the relationship to the mountains. Even after the extinction of the way of life of the Aztecs or the Maya with the arrival of the Spanish, these type of traditions perpetuated is even hundreds of years after the huge gigantic Holocaust that happened. And fortunately, we have a little bit of evidence as to what happened, and we still have a little bit of tradition of our peoples of that time. And so the reason why the Mesoamericans performed their magic on mountains, it was because the tip of the mountains were the closest places to head to the heavens. And they believed that a lot of their gods, they resided in the heavens. Even in the pyramid of Chichen Itza, we see how the snake god Kukulkan descends from the heavens onto the ground towards the cenote. And so we see a direct connection of the belief of the Mesoamericans with the stars and how do they reflect their own lives to the stars. And so any piece of magic that they were going to do, it was within the relation to the gods and to the spirits. It was not the type of magic that we do today, or people do today, where they do with angels or with crystals or with sage. For the people from Mesoamerica, it was a lot more palpable. They wanted to have a relationship between themselves and nature. Let me illustrate this with a story from an uncle of mine. He was a native, he spoke Nahuatl, and he told me the story that there was a lake close to where he lived. There was a still lake, it had very little flow of water. And the story was that around the lake there was a beautiful woman that sometimes appeared to men, and this particular woman lured them into the lake until they drowned. She basically drowned them. And so his parents told him when he was a little boy to stay away from that particular lake. And so the lake is not necessarily a representation of just what it is, a lake, but it was a representation of some gods or spirits that reside in that lake. The spirits are supposed to be still, they're supposed to be attached to the death, they're supposed to be attached to disease, because the lake is basically dead. And as such, it carried a type of spirit. Rivers, for example, had a more lively spirit. It was assumed that there were spirits that were more alive, that were more in tune with flow, with the movement, with harmony, with Tlaloc, with life-giving. And so this is the type of mentality that the people of Mesoamerica needed to identify before they perform a certain type of magical incantation. For example, if they wanted somebody dead, they will go to the still lake and try to make an offering to this particular goddess. If they wanted prosperity or rain for their crops in that particular year, then they went to the rivers and asked Tlaloc for rain and for prosperity. Another god, which is the most famous of Mexican gods, but nobody really knows it, is Tonantzin. Tonantzin is a goddess that used to be worshipped by the Aztecs and the surrounding Chichimecan and the Nahuatl a lot. She was a type of a mother goddess. She was the god of abundance and fertility and kindness. And the Spanish had a really hard time trying to kick the mentality of this goddess from their minds. The Spanish did not conquer primarily with sword. They primarily conquered with ideas. The idea of their Catholic Christianity was the primary tool to purge the people from this new world out of their native ideas and out of their traditions and their gods. This was Tonantzin. Tonantzin was one of the primary gods for the Aztecs, and so since the Spanish couldn't destroy Tonantzin, they transformed her. And so they made up the story of the Virgin of Guadalupe, and as such they assimilated the stories of a familiar on top of the mountain of Tepeyac with a Spanish-looking virgin, but that had brown skin instead of white skin, like most of their images. And so she was supposed to be the mother of Christ, and as such, the people adopted the Virgin of Guadalupe instead of Tonantzin, one out of violent pressure, and the other one from ideology. And the reason why I bring this up is because the goddess Tonantzin used to be worshipped on top of the hill of Tepeyac, just like the Virgin of Guadalupe. And to this day, the Virgin of Guadalupe still has a chapel on top of the hill of Tepeyac. And that is a place where people used to give offerings to the goddess Tonantzin. There are many other churches all over Mexico that were built on top of ruins, with the same type of purging of their gods. They couldn't quite destroy the god, so they transformed it into a Catholic version of their gods so that they could manipulate it and in turn can manipulate people. And so, as it is no surprise, the highest and most powerful gods, they lived on top of mountains. And there were some other gods that also were for the death or for the unborn or for a certain type of darkness. These gods were worshipped inside of caves. I have been inside of caves of some mountains in Mexico, and my cousins and I have been able to find archaeological ruins and offerings. Sometimes one is able to find if one goes deep enough. These has not only been found in Mexico City. Archaeologists have found these type of offerings all over Yucatan, all over Quintana Roo, where people made their offerings there. Sometimes there are human bones there, so it seems that there might have been some human sacrifice performed inside these caves. There are some pyramids inside of caves to worship, I'm assuming, some type of dark or unborn god. And so the tradition of offerings to contact certain spirits was certainly prevalent, but it was mostly done either in caves or in mountains or in rivers or in flowery patches. For example, if someone was pregnant and had a hard time with the pregnancy and they wanted the baby to be born healthy and hopefully for the mother not to die, they did an offering inside of a cave. Because the god of the cave, being either possibly a Tlezcatlipoca type of god or a Mictlatecutli type of god, therefore the offering was to protect the baby or to protect the mother as they are as the baby is in this dark cave, kind of like the belly of the mother, representing the belly of the mountain. And so offerings were made to these particular gods to try to offer a healthy birth. And then that goes back to us. What type of offerings or magic do people often do? One of the most prevalent types of magic that people today do is magic of love. They either want their exes back, or they want to find love, or they want to get rid of the one they have, and so on and so forth. And this is not new. The Aztecs also did something very similar, and they made offerings to Xochiquetzal. Xochiquetzal was the goddess of love, and as such, people made offerings. Xochitl basically means flower, and so they made offerings, or they put altars where there were patches of flowers, and they tried to invoke her there if there wasn't already an altar dedicated to Xochiquetzal. But much like our religion, people base themselves on past familiars as opposed to trying to make new familiars. Let me explain. For example, a lot of religions today, they claim to have a relationship with God. But the God that they seem to have a relationship with is the same God of either Abraham or Moshe or Jesus or John the Baptist. And so they worship an idea of a God. But for the Mesoamericans, or even for the people in the Bible, whenever they had a conversation with a particular God, that transformed them. Moses, for example, once he saw the burning bush, he went and freed the people from Egypt. Jesus, when he started having communications after his 40 days and 40 nights up in the middle of the desert, he wanted to redeem people and sacrifice himself for them and bring him a new type of gospel, if you go by the Gnostic interpretation. And so when the people from Mesoamerica tried to do something very similar, they had similar results. When they tried to invoke a familiar, there were huge changes done to them. But they were trying to invoke an established God, let's say in a particular pyramid or a particular altar. They made an offering, and sometimes their magic worked and sometimes it didn't. And so therefore, most of the shamans of Mesoamerica, from whenever this started, 2000 before Christ until today, The shaman will not tell anybody to worship any god. The shaman will ask them to contact the spirits directly, because the magician or the conjurer needs to establish a relationship with a particular spirit to establish a pact. Otherwise, it's a petition as opposed to a contract. And so once the place was selected, the next thing that the conjurer or the magician needed to do was to manufacture a tool. The tool was essential for the offering, and it was essential for the communication with a particular spirit or god. Let me give you an example. The knives with white hilts, they were particularly used for the sacrificial of birds or other types of sacrifices, and the color sometimes was correspondent of an element, in this case being either water or air. And there were other types of tools that the people have been able to find. Archaeologists or tomb robbers have been able to find in archaeological sites, such as wands or walking sticks or pendants or rings, and so on and so forth. But the reason why we know that they were used for magical purposes was because of the inscriptions. The inscriptions certainly had this item was manufactured to contact such a god and to create such an offering, or to render it as an offering to a particular god. And so first we have the place, and now we have the tool. And the next thing we need to have is the preparation of the body or the vestment. The body, for example, needed to not be needed to be dirty or filled with noxious substances. So most magicians abstain themselves from sex for at least 2 weeks before performing a magical ritual of trying to contact a spirit. And of course, they used to wear either penachos, headdresses, or they used to wear certain types of colors or skirts that had decoration or the elements were somehow attributed to the elements that belong to that particular god. And then the next thing they needed to do was to conduct the ritual. Now, before conducting the ritual, not only did they needed a tool to summon the particular god, but it was also a tool that they needed to use during the trance. So they either used a rattle or they used a drum. There has been some evidence of something that looks kind of like a guitar, but I'm not sure. I saw that in the Museum of Archaeology in Mexico, but there was not a lot of information on it, so I am not sure if this was particularly used by either people from Mesoamerica or mestizos or 100 or 200 years ago. I am not sure. But what we do know is that there are rattles in inscriptions, archaeological inscriptions. There are some drums. There are some kind of like wooden things that are kind of like this, but just way bigger, and they hit them with sticks. And so the idea of entering into a trance was essential. It was essential for the summoning of a particular spirit, and not necessarily summoning. It was the magician or the conjurer needed to enter into a trance. And if we follow the idea of Maria Sabina, much kind of like the people from Mesoamerica, they established their place to begin their chants. So they said, she used to say, I am the woman of the wind, I am the woman of the trees. But if we take a page from the knowledge of the people from Mesoamerica, we know that they have to establish their north, south, their east and west, and their center. And so therefore they needed to place themselves there first, as if they were inside of a pyramid or on top of a pyramid, and then try to direct their petition or the energy towards a particular cardinal point, which will lend itself to the petition of a particular favor. Let's say, for example, if it's to inflict harm on somebody, so it will be a petition to the north. Or let's say if it was to bring victory, so it was a petition to the south, because the sun is glorious in the south. Or for something to come to light, a petition goes to the east. Or for something to come to pass, a petition goes to the west. And so once they established their position based on the cardinal significance of the folklore or the tradition or the culture of these people, then they were able to chant about their place within the region and their kind of a trip or adulations to that particular corner of the universe. Let's say the east. And so first they start. You can start. I don't know. I am a man. I am a woman, and I stand on top of this mountain. These are the trees, and this is the dirt. These are the rocks. And then as you focus your attention towards the east, you can say the winds travels towards the east, or the waters travel towards the east, the clouds travel towards the east. My chants or my pledge travels towards the east. And then once the trance is going on, then one starts to visualize things, not necessarily because one is high or anything, which I'm pretty sure people from Mesoamerica certainly use hallucinogenics in some of these trips, but because we're visualizing this type of thing. And as we visualize, we try to get to a particular corner where that particular god resides. And as the particular god resides in that particular corner, then there's where we make a petition for that particular god either to appear or to fulfill our wishes. And so once we get there, some people were possessed, as some of the chronicles of the Spanish sometimes claim. Or sometimes the people swore that they established a communication with a particular spirit in a particular corner, and as such they were able to make their offerings in return for the favor. And so that is now considered a pact, where you're basically offering an offering in exchange for a particular favor. Now, most of the gods for the Aztecs, they used a lot of blood sacrifices. There's a lot of traditional blood sacrifice, especially the most powerful gods demanded blood sacrifices, with the exception of Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl is the god of knowledge, the god of also fertility, or not really fertility, but kind of like supplying things or bringing things or balancing things. And so Quetzalcoatl was one of those gods that also was also used a lot. The main pyramid of Chichen Itza is dedicated to Quetzalcoatl. They call it Kukulkan. And so Quetzalcoatl, he only took flowers. He did not take any blood. And so it's totally possible that you can try to make your shot at trying to ask Quetzalcoatl for something, if that's your thing. The other gods, probably not, because they demanded God, but that's based on that tradition. Many magicians from that time on until today have modified the type of sacrifices performed and the type of work done, because now we're very busy and we don't have time to be manufacturing tools or to be climbing up mountains or making pledges or getting high. Now we have to work and do the things that we need to do to survive. Now, what happened once the favor came true? If it didn't come true, the person probably was not obligated to continue that relationship with that particular spirit. But if their petition for some weird reason came true, then they established a relationship with that spirit, and then that relationship became possibly a familiar, depending on the behavior of the familiar. Some people are able to establish communications with familiars where they're able to talk to them all the time, like Maria Sabina did. But then after people used her, then that familiar stopped talking to Maria Sabina, and so the familiar just left Maria Sabina, and she was very sad. And there have been other types of relationships with familiars, where the familiar starts talking to them, and then they don't talk to them anymore, but they still are expected to have that relationship with that familiar, so they make stuff up. And so it was a tricky relationship between the people, the magician, and the god or the spirit. Thank you very much for listening to all of this. I hope it's of any use to you. Have a great one. Bye-bye.